Apollo Silver is advancing 2 projects in Arizona and California. President and CEO is Tom Peregoodoff. Tom, welcome to Kitco.
Good to be here with you, Michael.
Apollo is ticker APGO on the venture and APGOF on the OTCQB. Tom, what are you focused on?
Look, our big focus has been on advancing that Calico project. Arizona Silver for us represents a greenfield early stage opportunity, and the last 18 months since we formed, we really have focused on moving forward the Waterloo and Langtree deposits in San Bernardino County.
These things always start with the team, Tom. Maybe talk a bit about your past.
Yeah, sure. Look at so I've been in this game for, well, geez, let's call it roughly 30 years, give or take. I spent the majority of that, around 20 years, with BHP overseas for a lot of that. And when I left BHP in 2012, I was VP of exploration based out of Singapore. I came back and I joined the broader Friedland organization and took on Peregrine Diamonds, which was, you may recall, Michael, a Canadian diamond story up in Baffin Island in the Canadian Arctic. And Kathy Fitzgerald, who was with me here, and I took that project through resource development and into initial engineering studies, and sold it to De Beers back in 2018. And I, since then I've sat on boards such as Pretium up till the time of the sale to Newcrest, and a number of other smaller explorcos, as well as Mountain Province Diamonds. And Kathy Fitzgerald, we've known each other since 2012. She heads up the technical side, very, very strong background in exploration and resource development. She worked with Robert's Ivanhoe Electric, reviewing a lot of projects for that group. And then, of course, we've got a great support from people like Chris Cairns and Rona Sellers, who I also worked with in the past. And we're supported by a fantastic board. Andy Bowering is our chair. Andy's behind things like American Lithium, Prime Mining, you may have heard of. We've got some other very strong, it's a very senior board, given where we're at.
Tom, let's go into the project and why you like it. Let's start first with that low strip ratio. Why is that important?
Look at this. The Waterloo deposit is a bulk mineable disseminated silver system. We announced a resource of 110 million ounces of silver in measured and indicated on March 6th. And, the resource average grade is around 100 grams per ton. And I think one of the keys to the economics is looking forward is going to be the fact that even at a 50 gram per ton strip ratio, which is fairly conservative for these deposit types, we still have that very low strip ratio. And bottom line, it just means that we're moving less material. And that's got implications, obviously, for your OPEX. But I think as well, very importantly, it's got implications as far as your impact and your footprint on the landscape is concerned.
Now, you also mentioned barite. What is it and why does it matter to the project?
Barite is something that we've kind of downplayed a little bit till we better understood barite. But barite is sits on the critical mineral list of the U.S. feds. It is a material that is used primarily as a weighting agent for drilling fluids in the petroleum industry. And the reason it's deemed critical in this context is simply because at the moment the U.S. imports the majority of its barite from overseas providers, namely China. And obviously, as we've seen with some of the sort of disruptions in supply chain, they're looking to onshore a lot more of those critical materials. So when ASARCO had the project back in the 70s and early 80s, they took Waterloo through to complete feasibility, and it was a fully permitted mine at the time. And barite was a revenue stream. So we've spent some time better understanding the distribution of barite. Barite's a bit tricky to understand the distribution. You have to do a lot of whole rock work, whole rock chemistry, which you don't want to do unless you know a bit about the material you're going to be potentially producing. One of the keys is to understand whether or not it will be accepted by the American Petroleum Institute, because the API have some very strict requirements on the quality characteristics of barite, and we've wanted to do that work before and really understand whether it was going to be a saleable product. So we're advancing. I think barite has a real potential to add some significant upside revenue to any future development.
You said that there's no structural complexity. Why is this important, Tom?
Well, I think you can look at some of the stories in the last couple of years and where you get that structural complexity. And I can, my experience with Pretium up at Brucejack, not necessarily structural complexity, but geological complexity for sure. It makes mine planning more difficult. It means that obviously you need to spend a lot more time and effort, and really boils down to drilling to understand the distribution, in our case of the silver mineralization. Because we've got a thick package of relatively consistently mineralized sediments, our geological risk is greatly reduced. And again, that just boils down to time and money.
You're in the California and Arizona area. Talk about permitting.
Look, a lot of people ask how we've been able to advance in California when a number of the other groups that are trying to operate there have not been as successful as we've been. And when I say successful, I'll point out for people who are new to the story, we got our drill permits for the Waterloo project within 6 weeks of application. Which is pretty unheard of these days, even in mining-friendly areas such as Nevada and Arizona. And there's some reasons behind that. Number one, we're in the right county. The county of San Bernardino, California, supplies the vast majority of construction materials in the form of aggregate and limestone for concrete for the Southern California construction industry, obviously, which is quite large. There's some big names operating there, names that most people will know: Mitsubishi Cement, Cal Portland, etc. So the county as a whole understand the importance of responsible resource development and the benefits that it can bring. I think the second thing that differentiates us from some of the other groups is the mineral title that we have, and it all is on private land. So in the case of the Waterloo, we're on fee simple lands, which simply means I am the landowner. In the case of Langtree, the neighboring deposit where we have another 50 million ounces in inferred, it's all patented mining claims, which simplifies our process. It means that we revert to the county of San Bernardino in the first instance, as far as the lead permitting agency for our activities. And I think importantly, we have vested mining rights on both of those different pieces of land. And again, that really does facilitate the processes moving forward.
Are you funded?
We have, as of our last financials, we had 7.1 million in the bank. Currently we're and that was back in November, and all the big spend is behind us. The work that we're looking at now, as far as advancing Calico and Waterloo, is around some preliminary engineering studies. We want to get some additional metallurgical program underway, and we will start with some geotech drilling as well later in the year. So I'm not in a position right now where I feel forced to look for capital in these sort of volatile markets.
You are a relatively new company, Tom. You state that there's a chance for a significant re-rating. Explain what that is.
Well, look at, right now we've been trading at a pretty significant discount to some of our peers, I think for two reasons. One, the resource initially was inferred, which is the lowest confidence resource category. And I think we, with moving about 95% of that inferred resource at Waterloo into measured and indicated, I think that removes a lot of the uncertainty around the silver resource. And I think the second thing that we're looking at really in this space is we are in California, and it's taking I think investors some time to understand that you can work in California, but you got to be in the right county, and I think it helps if you're on private lands or patented mining claims.
Who are some significant shareholders at Apollo?
Jupiter, we've got some very strong institutional support. We raised $53 million back in July of 2021. And as part of that, Jupiter Funds out of the UK, Joe Lunn and his team, they're now our largest shareholder at about 11% on a fully diluted basis. They were buying in the market last year on weakness. As well, insiders and strategics and sort of family friends, we're owned somewhere in the neighborhood of sort of 18%, I think, give or take. And we've got other institutions. Sprott participated in that financing back in 2021. So we do have a good mix of institutional shareholders sitting at about 35% of taking that finance, and then management and other friendlies, and then retail.
Lastly, Tom, catalysts over the next 12 months.
Look at for us, there's a couple things. Obviously, continued de-risking at Calico, supported, I think, by we're getting into an environment where we're seeing some upward pressure on precious metal prices. I think as we continue to de-risk from an engineering and perspective, and getting into some of the initial permitting, that'll be I think very positive from a market perspective. I think as well, we are looking at additional projects. We've got Arizona Silver, but we are looking at additional projects. The current precious metal markets right now, there's a lot of stories, not dissimilar to ours, good stories that have struggled in the current market conditions, and we've got capital support behind us. So if we do identify an asset that we like, I think shareholders can look to us to act on that.
Tom, thanks for your time.
Appreciate it, Michael. Happy to come back anytime.
He is Tom Peregoodoff, President and CEO of Apollo Silver. My name is Michael McRae, and you're watching Kitco Mining.